Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. Our webinar tonight is going to be navigating physical and drug testing requirements for your captain's license. I'm Captain Bob Villar, the owner and president of Mariners Learning System. Tonight I'm joined with Sammy Calora. She's going to be helping with the questions and making sure that if I have any technical issues, there's somebody here who knows what to do. So we're going to begin now. Before we get going, there's just a little bit of housekeeping things that we need to take care of. Make sure that your audio is turned on. If you look down in the bottom of your screen, you'll see an icon that looks like a speaker. That's your audio. Make sure that that is clicked on so that you can hear what I have to say. And then on the right-hand side, there's going to be a screen that will allow you to have questions and answers. As we're going through this, if I say something that you would like to have clarified or you have an additional question on, please don't hesitate to put it in there. Sammy will help us with making sure that we get those things out. For the most part, I'll get to all the questions that come up. Because of this particular topic being physicals and drug testing, I want to make sure that I don't come across as if I'm a doctor or a physician. I'm not. I'm going to give you information based on my 25 years plus experience within this industry. When it comes down to specific medical questions, you're going to see that I'm going to speak very generally, or I'm going to tell you that I can't answer that question. At the end of the day, when it comes down to the drug test and the physical, the National Maritime Center, known as the NMC, they're the ones who are going to be making the final decision, and they're going to be assisted by what is called an MRO, which is a doctor who's been specifically trained to check out your tests with regards to the physical and also the drug testing. So that's a medical review officer. Before we begin, we always poll the people who are going to be part of these seminars so that we're making sure that we address those questions and those specific people who are here. There's a lot of different ways that we can take this information. We want to make sure that we stay on top of what the people who are here are looking to hear. So the first one, the top number one is 62% of the people want to explore personal and professional opportunities, maybe even begin a side business. There's about 20% who want to turn their love for boating into a career. 11% want to be more safe and comfortable on the water. And then there is a small group of people who want to offset the cost associated with running your boat. We also went on with this particular one and asked some more questions. We wanted to know who was concerned with completing the application forms correctly, and 56% of you were. That is a good reason to be here. I know that the physical and the drug testing may not be the shiniest and the most exciting part of getting your license, but for sure it's one of the areas that most struggle with, and not because it's that much more difficult. It's just that they've never taken the time, or no one's taken the time to them explain what needs to be done. So the title is, let's make sure that we avoid the number one reason for captain's licenses and applications get delayed. Most delays come from two easy to miss mistakes: drug testing errors and the medical exam issues. We're going to show you how to avoid both of those delays, and we're going to take a step-by-step approach. Before we get too deep into this, I do want to go over for licensing purposes. There are some other requirements. You're going to need to be able to pass the physical and the drug test. You're going to need an adult CPR and first aid course. We always recommend the American Red Cross or the Heart Association. You're going to need a TWIC card, which is a background check done through Homeland Security. You're going to need a minimum of boating experience as a general statement. You'll need at least 360 days worth of boating experience. 90 of those days need to be within the last 3 years. The Coast Guard calls that recency. When we're talking about days on the water, 4 hours on the water counts as a day. In one 24-hour period of time, you can only claim 1 day. So if I was to go out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and I came back at 7 or 8, that is 1 day. If I left at 10 o'clock at night and I came back at 2 o'clock in the morning, that or let's say 4 o'clock in the morning, that would count as 2 days, because there are 2 calendar days between me leaving my docks. So what you're going to learn today, and what we plan on going over, is how to complete the Coast Guard medical form correctly. Again, as I said earlier, it's not that it's that difficult, but there are certain areas that if you're not paying attention to, you're going to for sure fall into a pitfall or make an error or miss something relatively simple that's going to delay the paperwork. The way I always explain it is when your paperwork goes to the National Maritime Center, because they're the ones who are going to be making the final decision and issuing the credentials. That's basically the headquarters for the Coast Guard and where all the administrative work actually is done at this level. There's two piles. The pile that you want your paperwork to stay in is the good pile, which means everything was filled out correctly and you follow the process and procedures that we've defined. The other pile is the pile that you don't want to find your application to get into. And that's the one where they have to check on information. There's missing signatures. There's missing documentation. That pile is for sure not where you want to end up, because it could take 3 or 4 or 5 more months for them to track that stuff down. So the goal of this particular webinar is to try to keep you in the fast track and make sure that there's no unnecessary delays. We're going to discuss what you should expect at your physical, so that when you walk in, you're prepared. It's not just showing up for the physical and having a doctor doing their exam. There's some pre-work that you can do to make sure that you're well in line to have this go as smoothly as you possibly can. We're going to talk a little bit about taking a valid drug test and what that actually is. You're not just going to go to the local CVS and pee in a cup for like a job interview drug test. That's not going to work out for you. We're going to talk about that a little bit deeper. With each of the drug tests and the physical, we're going to break them down one by one. And within each of these two categories, we're going to discuss some of the common mistakes and hopefully give you some advice on how to avoid these mistakes. Once you are licensed, there is some compliance that you're going to have to meet to ensure that your license remains active. We're going to discuss that, and we have a few tools that we've created to help keep you on track. Now, as we go through this and we go through these slides, I'm going to stop 2 or 3 times during the presentation. At the appropriate moment, we're going to review what we've just gone over. And if there's any questions or any areas that I need to help with clarity, I'll be more than happy to do this. And as I said earlier, my goal is to answer any questions and all questions as best we can. When we talk about the process, a lot of people talk about the application process being very, very difficult. It's simpler than it sounds, just as long as you follow the right steps. Where it gets a little bit complicated or a little chunky is if you do not follow the steps, or if you think you know better than the Coast Guard or the National Maritime Center. Remember, they're the ones who are going to be issuing the credentials. They're the ones that you want to make sure are happy. So, why does this matter? The medical exam and drug test are required for all licenses. So if you're getting the OUPV 6-pack, also known as a charter boat captain's license, or a 25, 50, or 100-ton master's level license, this exam is going to be required for either one of those 2 licenses. Just as a brief review, the OUPV 6-pack, or the charter boat captain's license, is for operators of uninspected passenger vessels. This allows you to take up to 6 paying passengers plus 1 crew member out on the water for hire. That's why they call it a 6-pack. The master's level license is the highest level license that you can receive. It's issued in 3 versions, a 25, 50, or 100-ton license. With the Mariners Learning System courses that are approved by the Coast Guard, it's all the same course, it's all the same program, it's all the same exam. The license is going to be issued based on your experience. The size boats that you have experience on is going to dictate whether you get a 25, a 50, or 100-ton license. Just to wrap this little review up, we always recommend people go for the highest license that they can qualify for. The 6-pack, you do not need to be a U.S. citizen, but you do need to have a green card or a working visa. The Masters, you need to be a U.S. citizen. The 6-pack, you need to be a minimum of 18 years old. The Masters, you need to be a minimum of 19 years old. So just a quick overview. So with the medical exam and the drug test, regardless of which one of these two licenses you choose to go for, you're going to be required by the Coast Guard to not only take the physical and drug test, but also pass it. Most of the delays happen when these two steps are done wrong or they're not done on time. We're going to talk about that a little bit further, and making sure that you get them right early will keep your application moving smoothly without delays. We always tell people that this is a little bit more than just paperwork. This is literally the foundation of your approval. So what does the Coast Guard require? For the drug testing, there's a form that's CG 719P. That's the drug testing form. And this form records the fact that you did a DOT 5-panel drug test. That's the requirement. The DOT stands for Department of Transportation. The 5-panel, they're going to be checking for opioids, PCP, amphetamines, marijuana, and cocaine. So those are the 5 drugs that they're going to be testing you for. One of the things that we talk about with drug testing, especially in today's world, I happen to live in a state that marijuana is legal for recreational purposes. That may be fine for my state, but you need to remember that this is a federal license issued by the United States Coast Guard. So federal law does not recognize marijuana as a recreational drug. So if you're smoking marijuana, even though it may be legal in your state, you're going to fail this DOT 5-panel drug test. So I hear clients all the time say that the drug test in many instances was the most difficult thing for them to study. People ask me, if I were to partake with things like marijuana, how long does that stay in my system? So if you're a slender person, 30 days. If you're a larger guy like me or a larger person, you can expect the THC, which is what they're testing for, to stay in your body for up to 45 days. The best way to plan for this is don't do drugs, and you're going to be just fine. Now, there is also masking agents that you can purchase online to try to alter the results of the test. The Coast Guard's aware of these, and they actually test for that. So if they find an altering drug within your urine sample, there would only be one reason why that would be there, and that's because you want to alter the results, and the Coast Guard and the MRO is going to give you a fail for your drug test. The review or the drug test must be reviewed and signed by the medical review officer, the MRO. Without that signature, it's worthless. And the drug test must be taken within 6 months of your application. A little bit of planning needs to be done here. With regards to your course itself, if you're taking a course with Mariner's Learning System, once you begin the program, you have a year to complete the course. Once you complete the course, you have an additional year to meet the requirements of the Coast Guard. So if you start the program today and you go out and do a drug test, you're going to artificially put a time schedule in play where you're going to have to finish everything within 6 months unless you want to go pee in a cup again. So you can finish these courses in less time. We've had people finish in 3 weeks, 3 months. We've had people take a year. But when you're going through the process, think this through. So you don't need to rush and go do the drug test today because, again, you're going to have to finish within 6 months unless you want to go redo a drug test. Then on the medical exam, the form is CG 719K. You can get all these forms off of our website. We provide them easily. We have directions on how to fill them out. And examples to make sure that you get these things right. So the medical exam form has to be completed by a licensed provider. This is a medical doctor, a nurse practitioner, or a physician's assistant. Those are the 3 licensed providers who can perform the medical exam. Now, I'm going to repeat that a couple more times as we go through the program. That's not an accident. That's on purpose just to remind you that it needs to be a doctor, a nurse practitioner, or a physician's assistant who's doing this physical for you. The results need to be recorded on the official Coast Guard form, 719K. It can't be a letter from your employer. It can't be a letter from your doctor. It must be on this specific form. And finally, with the medical exam portion of this, it must be completed within 12 months of your application date. So you can see that there's a little bit of a difference. The drug test has to be done within 6 months of your application, and the physical exam needs to be done within 12 months of the application. So these are the two steps that cause more delays than any of the other ones, because they're easy to get wrong and they're looked at very carefully. So the Coast Guard and this medical review officer, he is looking at, or he or she is looking very closely at the results of your medical exam and your drug test. So these are two areas where a little extra time and preparation will pay off later on down the road. Let's try to understand the Coast Guard medical form a little bit further. This is the official form that the Coast Guard uses to determine if you're physically qualified for a merchant mariner credential, or as we would know it, for your captain's license. So this is literally basically in the bottom, I talk about this being a routine. This isn't just a routine checkup. This is a job readiness evaluation. So there's going to be questions to make sure that you are going to be physically capable of performing the duties of a licensed captain. Now, this isn't intended to scare you or I'm 65, I can't do what I could when I was 24, but I would have no problem keeping my license current based on the current medical requirements. We've literally I had one gentleman who was 94 years old qualify and get his license. So with regards to the physical and the drug testing, the Coast Guard's not looking at your age. In fact, with licensing and that process, if you are going to be a commercial pilot, you need to retire at 65. The Coast Guard has no upward restrictions on your age, just as long as you're physically able to pass this physical and meet the other requirements. As I said earlier, the form is required for all licensed applicants and your renewals. The form must be completed by the doctor, the nurse practitioner, and the physician's assistant. Again, this confirms that you're medically fit to operate a vessel professionally. So the results of this physical have nothing to do with your ability to run your boats recreationally. The only impact this has on you is operating your boat professionally, where there is some sort of form of payment that has passed between you and the customers or the clients. The Coast Guard calls that consideration, and it doesn't necessarily need to be money. You could trade out a weekend at a golf resort in lieu of them taking you out on their boat. This is what the Coast Guard will call consideration, and those would require that you have a captain's license. Repeating myself once again, the medical form is good for 12 months when it's submitted with your application. So let's talk a little bit about the physical itself and what to expect. So this should be a non-invasive exam. There should be no surprises when you walk in there. The physician is going to do some basic screenings like your vision, your blood pressure, and your hearing. So before we go further, let's just talk about the vision piece to it. So you're going to need to have your vision correctable. And let's use another area of vision that some people get tripped up on. So there's lots of rumors that are out there that if I am colorblind, I cannot get a captain's license. Not true. So myself, I'm color deficient in that red and green, when it's put together, it creates an issue for me. But there are a couple different types of vision tests for color blindness. One are the circles with the numbers that are hidden. I can't pass that. If I go to a doctor and they give me those circles, I don't even take that exam, just because I know what the results are going to be. If I'm supposed to see 32, I'm going to see 64. It doesn't matter. However, there's something called the Farnsworth lantern test, which is a series of lights that you're looking down into a device, and that test I can pass. So although I'm color deficient, I'm not actually color blind, and there's no restrictions on my license. If you are completely colorblind in that you only see black and white, you do not see color, or you cannot pass either one of the two exams that I just discussed, then the Coast Guard is going to put a restriction on your license that only allows you to operate professionally from sunrise to sundown. So that doesn't mean you can't operate the license, can't have a license. It just means you can't operate professionally once the sun goes down. Now, again, these restrictions are for the commercial use of a license, not for you as a recreational boater. Even if you go through this process and the Coast Guard determines that you are colorblind, that has no restrictions on your ability of going out at nighttime and running your boat recreationally. Blood pressure. Last I did it was 150/90. That was the minimum number. They may have adjusted to 145/90. I'm not 100% sure. Those numbers change sometimes. But with blood pressure, if you have high blood pressure and you're taking medication, as long as you can beat whatever their minimum number is at the time of your exam, then you're cool. They don't mind that you're taking blood pressure medicine to beat their numbers. And then with hearing, they do want to make sure that you can hear. If you have hearing aids, that is not a disqualifier. Now, with each of these conditions that we just discussed, if there is a concern, the Coast Guard can always make an exception or put a waiver in place based on your request that they've gathered enough medical information to determine that whatever that medical shortcoming may have been, that wasn't a reason that you should not be licensed. Next, they're going to review the medications, your conditions, and your medical history. This is something that I would recommend when you show up, that you have a list of these medications that you're taking so that you're not scrambling around trying to remember. Some of these medications may cause a failure with the drug test. You need to be aware of this. So one time when I was running charters, I got called for a random drug test. I peed in the cup, and one of the over-the-counter medications that I was taking caused me to fail a drug test. And not only was this alarming and really concerning, but a little bit of review, I was able to talk to the MRO, and we redid the drug test. And fortunately for me, I had gone to a doctor for the cold or whatever ailment I had. And so there was a medical record that I was seeing a doctor. The doctor had told me to go get an over-the-counter medication, and that medication caused a failure for me. So with the medication, some medications that you need to be concerned with. If you're on opioids, if you've got back pains or neck pain, you're taking some sort of a Percocet or Oxycontin or fentanyl, those are all medications that are going to be very problematic for the Coast Guard. Now, just because you're taking, let's say that you had an operation and you're taking pain medications for 2 weeks. The fact that you were taking pain medication as long as they were prescribed is not an issue with the Coast Guard. What would be an issue with the Coast Guard is if 18 months later you were still taking those medications. And then they're going to also review your medical history. You're going to want to make sure that you bring a copy of the medical form with you. And before you leave, make sure that you check the form itself. On almost every page on the bottom, the person who performed the physical is going to have to, at very least, initial and date the page. And that's on almost every single page. They're going to have to sign it in a couple places, and they're going to have to date it in a couple places. So you want to make sure that the form is signed, dated, and filled out correctly before you ever leave the office. So take that moment or two, review it, look at it. And what I would recommend is that long before you go to the doctor's office, that you upload or download the form itself and just review it so that you know what they're going to be looking at, that you can prepare for any questions on any conditions or issues that you may have, and that you have all the information that the physician is going to require to correctly do your physical. And again, the form is valid for 12 months once it's signed. It's not valid for 12 months and a day. There's a reason why I'm driving these. Who is approved to sign off your physical. And there's another reason why I'm really pushing the amount of day that the form is actually good for. If you go 12 months and a day, it doesn't matter. It's no good. You're going back from the physical again. The Coast Guard doesn't expect you to be in perfect health, but you do need to meet the minimum safety standards that they have set for being a licensed captain. So what are some of the common mistakes that are made on the medical form? It's generally small errors that can cause really big delays. A couple of things that you want to watch out for is using the wrong form or an outdated version. This is very common. When you look at the form, if you get the form off of Mariner's Learning System website, when you upload or download that form, it will be the latest form that is approved on that particular date. But if you download that form today and in 6 months from now, the Coast Guard changes the form, then that's on you. Now, on all of these forms in the upper right-hand corner, there's going to be a date. This date is the approval date of that particular form. Now, one of the things that you want to be careful with that date is up until recently, the Coast Guard's forms used to have an expiration date that were a year or two old, but the forms were still good. And when you called the NMC and asked them why, they would basically say that, well, that's just a date for us internally to evaluate the form itself. I don't know whether that was true. However, currently, all the forms are up to date and none of them are expired, but always look in the upper right-hand corner and make sure that the form that you're using has a date that has not passed. Another of the larger issues is the doctor, the provider, forgets to sign and date the form. Their doctors, they may not fill out this form on a daily basis, weekly basis, or monthly basis. Make sure that it is signed in the appropriate locations, and also make sure that the date is there. A signature without a date is useless. They're going to ask the doctor or the physician or the nurse practitioner or the PA for information on their credentials. Make sure that all that information is there. And then again, we talked a little bit about the examiner isn't qualified. They're not a doctor, a nurse practitioner, or a physician's assistant. If they're not one of those people, you can't get a letter from your neighbor who's a heart surgeon, or your spouse is a nurse. None of that stuff works unless they fit into one of these three categories. Just one missing checkbox or signature can and will delay your entire application. You're going to go into that wrong pile that I discussed earlier. Always double check your form before you leave the exam room. For sure, before you get out of the doctor's office, make sure that you put eyeballs on this. Take a couple extra minutes and make sure that it's filled out properly. Because if you just take it expecting the examiner to have done everything correctly and not miss something, that's not going to work out well for you in most instances. So those are the common mistakes that we find with the medical forms. Next, what happens if I have a medical condition? So if I was sitting listening to this, that would be a concern that I would have. And basically, if you do have a medical condition and some of the things that I discuss apply to you, here's some of the things to expect and how you can best prepare to make sure that this issue or condition isn't necessarily a disqualifier for licensing purposes. I think the first and most important thing is to make sure that you're honest and bring any related medical records. So if this is not a regular doctor that you go to, make sure that you give them the documentation necessary to support whatever your problems may be. Many problems are not disqualifier. As I said, being colorblind is not a disqualifier. Having high blood pressure is not a disqualifier. If you have sleep apnea alone is not a disqualifier as long as it is a treatable condition that is being managed by a physician and the physician is willing to sign off and say that you are healthy enough and in a position that you can be a licensed captain and this should not be disqualified. Heart disease. So if you had a stent placed in to help with the flow of blood, or you had bypass surgery, those alone are not disqualifiers. Now, there is some requirements that the Coast Guard's going to have if those are conditions that you live with. One, if somebody's been messing with your heart, the Coast Guard's going to require that there's been 18 months that have passed where nobody has tickered around with your ticker. No more adjustments, no changing batteries in a pacemaker, no opening you up or things like that. The Coast Guard's going to also require the cardiologist to sign you off and say that this is not a condition that is a disqualifier or worrisome. And if the Coast Guard does have a concern, they may require that you do a stress test. But all those are on a case-by-case type of a basis. The thing to walk away from here is if you do have some sort of heart disease or issues with your heart, that is not an automatic disqualifier. We want to make sure that you do bring in the related documentation to whatever your issue happens to be. The Coast Guard may request additional documents. So if you, let's say that you had some sort of heart disease and you did have a stent put in, for example, the Coast Guard may require, and let's say that you had let's say you had a stent placed in and you have high blood pressure. Those are two concerning issues, and together that elevates the Coast Guard's concern. So in that particular case, they may come back to you and say, well, now we need some additional supporting documentation, or we may need a specialist to evaluate your condition. If this is the case and you have multiple conditions that we discussed, then the process is and it's probably going to take longer. So just plan ahead. Remember, you've got a year from the time that you complete the course to meet the requirements of the Coast Guard. That year happens to be in line with how long your physical exam is good for. So if I had some medical conditions that I was concerned with, I would plan accordingly. Now, before I gave any provider any money from a course like Mariner's Learning System, any approved school that you're going to get your captain's license from, if you are concerned about your medical conditions, so with us, with Mariners, what we do is we recommend that you do the CPR, first aid, drug test, and physical either after you complete the course or very near to the end of the course, just because of those time requirements that we just discussed a few moments ago. However, if you are concerned with your medical condition, you can submit that application do those requirements, submit your application to the Coast Guard, pay them an application fee. They will review all that information, and if there's any concerns, they will deal with them. And if there are no concerns, they will give you a letter that will say that this is the license based on your application that you qualify for. You either need to take an exam with the Coast Guard or you need to take an exam with an approved school. If you go down that route, you choose to go with Mariners, then we'll give you a certificate of completion when you completed the course. You submit that with that letter to the Coast Guard, and they will issue the license based on whatever that letter happened to say, as long as those conditions haven't changed. So what really matters here is whether your condition affects your ability to operate safely, not whether you've ever had a diagnosis. So just because you've either had an illness or perhaps had an operation, or you've had a tweaked back or some sort of other issue, that is not an automatic disqualifier. Coast Guard's looking at present day and the future. So if I do have, I'm sorry. Are there any questions before we move on? I just want to take a moment, make sure that if there's any questions on what we've just covered. We've talked about the medical form. We've talked about the process. We've talked about some common errors and how to handle any medical conditions. If there's any questions, Sammy, I'll be more than happy to answer them. Otherwise, we'll just move on to the drug testing requirements.
Somebody wants to know they have severe sleep apnea. Is that going to be disqualified?
Okay, so the question is, if I have severe sleep apnea, is that an automatic disqualifier? Again, I'm going to be really careful because I'm not a doctor. But if you have a CPAP machine, or if you're using another process to control the sleep apnea, and if your doctor will sign off saying that you're not going to fall asleep during the middle of the day, or it's a condition. So one of the ways that I would look at this is, do you still have your driver's license? If you still have your driver's license with sleep apnea, then I would say all is not lost. But you'll know your condition a lot better. And if your sleep apnea is severe and it is a concern, then I would recommend that you go through the application process prior to giving a school any money.
Somebody wants to know if you could go over what the medical review officer is again.
Okay, so the question is, what is a medical review officer? So a medical review officer is a person who has been specially trained specifically to review medical exams and drug testing results for people who want to become merchant mariners. So it's not a special class of doctor or a special class of nurse practitioner. It is just one who has gone through the training process required by the Coast Guard to be recognized as an MRO.
And then the last question right now is, somebody lost their eye in an accident.
Mm-hmm.
Can they still get a captain's license?
Sure. So this happens. So the question is, if I lost my eye in an accident, can I still get my captain's license? And it's funny. It's not funny, but hold on for a second, please. Every time I do a seminar on this, or I talk to people on this, this happens. I hear this question often, so it must be much more prevalent than I ever realized. With regards to that question, if I lost an eye in an accident, can I still be licensed? The answer is yes. You still may be licensed. The defining piece of this is, let's say that I was playing as a kid and I got shot in the eye with a BB and I lost my eye. That is not a disqualifier. But if I have a cognitive disease that took my one eye and has the potential of moving into my healthy eye, that in itself can be a disqualifier. So if you lose your eye just to an accident, as horrific as that would have been, that is not an automatic disqualifier for your license. But if it was through some sort of a disease that could go from your eye that you lost into the healthy eye, that is a concern for the Coast Guard. Okay. So those are the questions that we have on the medical exam portion of it. Now what we're going to do is just walk through the drug testing portion of this, and then do a review of both. So the drug testing, what does the Coast Guard require? Each of these are required for your drug test to be accepted. We went over a little bit earlier that it's got to be a DOT, Department of Transportation, 5-panel drug test. And again, they're testing for marijuana, amphetamines, cocaine, PHC, and what else did I miss? Let me see. Amphetamines, cocaine, marijuana, and PCP. So those are the 5 things that they're going to be testing for. It's got to be collected by a SAMHSA certified lab. The SAMHSA, I could give you what that means, but it's just a certified lab that the Coast Guard recognize for doing the DOT 5-panel drug test. Now, one of the things that you want to remember when you're doing this drug test is some employers require that you do a drug test for employment in their facility or in their company. That drug test may be accepted as long as it is a 5-panel DOT approved drug test. A lot of employers, they do a very basic drug test, and that would not meet the requirements. Now, if I am a police officer, or if I'm a military person, or I am in a job that requires me to do this DOT 5-panel drug test, and I am enrolled in a random drug testing program, as long as I have not failed or refused to take a drug test in the last 180 days, the Coast Guard will accept that in lieu of taking an additional examination. Going back over the MRO, it has to be reviewed and signed by a medical review officer. It needs to be completed within 6 months of your application. Remember, there's a difference between your drug test and your physical. The physical is 12 months. The drug test is 6 months. And the Coast Guard's very, very specific on that. If you go 6 months and a day, it's not going to work out for you. And the results need to be documented on the Coast Guard Form 719P. As I said earlier, THC is included on this drug test. Federal rules apply. And if you are in a state that allows you recreational marijuana and you recently smoked or partaken in any way, you're going to fail the drug test. We recently had a student call us who had just failed the drug test, and they said that they only took 1 edible gummy. And unfortunately for them, it was 1 too many because the THC registered and they failed the drug test, and they were required to wait a year before they were going to be allowed to test again. And that had a cascading effect because once they waited that year, their certificate of completion for the course that they took was no longer going to be valid. And their physical was no longer going to be valid. And they were going to have to resubmit their application. So there were a lot of consequences of that 1 gummy. So just think it through. The drug test is one of those exams that you need to know what the results are before you take the test. Don't go in there thinking, well, I don't know. No, this is one of those exams that if you don't know what the results are going to be, don't do it. What drugs tests get rejected? What happens? So very common. It's not a DOT 5-panel drug test. People go in, they'll go online, they'll look up a drug testing lab, or there's mail order drug testing. There's all sorts of different ways in today's world to get a drug test. If it's not an official DOT 5-panel drug test that is being processed through a SAMHSA lab, it's not going to be approved. The MRO didn't sign it. Even though it went to a lab, it may not have that signature from an MRO. So if I'm going to an approved DOT drug test, we'll go down on the bottom of this slide. It says, say it up front. Yes. Is this a DOT 5-panel with an MRO review and chain of custody for Coast Guard licensing? So tell them specifically what this drug test is for and they will tell you whether they meet the requirements. There is something that are called the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations. And the CFR is basically rule and direct everything that an approved school or anyone getting a captain's license, including these drug testing facilities, have to do and how they have to do it. So if you ask up front, then they'll tell you, yeah, we do drug testing for Coast Guard captains all the time, or no, we don't. There also needs to be a chain of custody form. So once you pee in this container, then they're going to put some identifying information on this. And this information is going to be transferred every time somebody touches your sample. This ensures that there is no funny business or that a drug sample got switched with somebody else's. So there's going to be a federal chain of custody form that needs to stay with the sample. There are times when this chain of custody form gets lost, nothing that you can do about it. But if that chain of custody form did not stay with that sample, you're going to be peeing in a cup again. The other one, again, going back on that 6 months, if your test is more than 6 months, they're not going to accept it. And if the test is missing your name, your date, or verifying details on the report, it's not going to be accepted. I think the takeaway with everything that I'm saying up until this point is that the details really matter with the Coast Guard with regards to this stuff. There's not a gray area. It's literally black and white. Was it a DOT test? Yes or no? Was it a SAMHSA certified lab that did the testing? Yes or no? Did an MRO officer review the exam and did they sign it off? Yes or no? Was there a chain of custody form that accompanied the specimen? Yes or no? Is the test less than 6 months old? Yes or no? Do the name and details connect with the application or the applicant? Yes or no? So it's very, very black and white. There's no gray area with this, for sure, the drug test, and there is very little gray area with the physical itself, if any at all. So what happens behind the scenes when you do a drug test? To make sure that the test meets the Coast Guard review standards, it's going to the SAMHSA certified lab. The results are going to be reviewed by the medical review officer. The MRO may contact you to confirm medications or clarify the results. So you may get a false positive, or there may be a question as to what medications you're taking that you may not have reported on your physical that are now showing up in your drug test. And then, as we've said a few times, the MRO is going to sign and certify the final results. If there's any questions, the MRO is not going to sign this. That's part of their requirements. They take their position, they professionally take their position as being very important, and they're a critical piece to the licensing process. So there's no looking the other way or wink, wink, wink with this. It's, again, either you passed or you didn't. The Coast Guard's only going to accept fully reviewed and signed results. The MRO basically acts as the gatekeeper. If your test skips a step, it's incomplete, even if you've passed. So just be aware that the drug testing is relatively simple as long as you go through the process and use the proper facilities. So let's talk a little bit about, you've gone through this, you've done the CPR, first aid, drug test, and physical, you've demonstrated your time on the water, you've submitted your application, you've completed a course such as Mariner's Learning System, and the Coast Guard has issued the license itself. Now, once you are licensed, there is an ongoing drug testing requirement. So if you're just getting your license for recreational purposes and you never plan on using your license professionally, once you've gone through the process I just explained, you don't need to do another drug test until your 5-year period of time comes. Your license is good for 5 years. Every 5 years you need to renew it. So if you're just doing this for recreational purposes, you're never going to use your license professionally, then every 5 years you're going to need to pass a drug test and physical. If you are going to use your license professionally, or if you believe you're going to use your license professionally, then you're going to have to follow the drug testing rules and regulations at all times. What this means to you is that you need to be in a random drug testing program, that you can be in what they call a consortium, that at any moment in time can call you. So basically this consortium is an organization that for a fee will do random drug tests to meet the requirements of this, which are covered again by those CFRs that I discussed before. And they will have 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people in their program. They all vary. And out of that the number of people who are in their program, the CFRs dictate that a certain percentage need to be tested on a monthly, quarterly, or yearly basis. So your name now goes into a random list, and if you get picked, you have 3 days to show up at a drug testing facility and pee in a cup. If you're overseas, or if you have a undeniable reason for not being able to be there within 3 days, then they may extend that period of time. But it's not like I have the flu, or I don't feel well, or my mom is not feeling well today, or anything like this. It needs to be a bona fide reason, because when they call you, part of your agreement with them is that you'll pee in the cup within 3 business days. So that's the random drug testing piece to it. The consortium that you choose to go with also needs to test you if there was an accident on the water. You're peeing in a cup. If you are a licensed captain and you hit a dock too hard and people get hurt, you hit another boat, or there's some sort of an accident that you're involved in, they're going to require that you do a drug test. Or if there's some sort of other reasonable cause for testing, it might be your employer thinks that you look high, or the Coast Guard may board your boat and thinks that you might be driving underneath the influence. These are all part of the ongoing drug testing program. Earlier, I had mentioned if you're a police officer, if you're a military person, if you're a police officer or a military person and you're in a random drug testing program, and as I said, you have not failed or refused to take a drug test within the last 180 days, but they could have tested you, then the Coast Guard will take a letter from them stating this is the case. You must be actively enrolled and able to show proof if inspected. So with my license, there's a card that you get from these consortiums. I have a card that goes with my license that if I were to be actively engaged in professionally operating a boat, I would not only show the Coast Guard my license, I would also give them my drug testing card. And it should be right there, ready to go. It shouldn't be something you have to hunt around for or tell them you don't have, because if you don't have it, they're going to make the assumption that you don't meet this requirement. Failure to comply can result in a license suspension, or they can take your license away. So you want to make sure that you meet these requirements. You have to remember that getting a license is the start of your compliance journey, not the end. So again, these things aren't really very difficult. I've been in a drug testing program for over 20 years. I've not gotten called, not once. That doesn't mean that it couldn't happen, but in the last 20 years, it hadn't happened. When I first got my license, I got called right away. It's just literally the luck of the draw. Before we wrap up the drug testing piece, let's just stop for a moment, answer any questions that we might have on this or the medical exam portion. We've gone over what the Coast Guard requires for the drug testing, the most common reasons testing get rejected, what happens behind the scenes after you test, how to take a fully compliant test and what one actually is. And then we've talked about your ongoing responsibilities after your license. So any questions that you might have, I'll be more than happy to answer them now.
Someone wants to know, is it a urine or a blood sample?
So the question is for the drug testing, is it a urine sample or are they going to be drawing blood? It's peeing in a cup, so it's a urine sample. If somebody says that for this purpose, they're going to draw blood, that's not part of a DOT 5-panel drug test.
Somebody wants to know, what if their state allows you to have marijuana for medical purposes?
Sure. So the question is, if my state allows me to have medical marijuana, what does that do for me? So whether it's medical marijuana or it's recreational marijuana, the federal government doesn't recognize marijuana in either case. So if you have a medical card for buying marijuana, although you will be legal in your state, the Coast Guard will, if you take a drug test or if you are operating professionally and you get called for a drug test, you're going to fail it and you're most likely going to lose your license. So it's no different. At one time, I had severe back problems, lower back problems, to the point that I could barely stand straight. Actually, I couldn't stand straight. And I was taking Percocet to help me with the pain. While I was on Percocet, and it ended up escalating to fentanyl long before people knew what fentanyl was. This was many years ago, but I because of the pain, I was on fentanyl. While I was receiving this treatment, I was not able to use my license professionally. Once that treatment had done it, once I was fixed and I stopped taking those hard drugs, then I was able to operate my vessel professionally again, which would be the same thing for medical marijuana. If you have a condition that requires long-term use of medical marijuana, then you're not going to be able to pass the physical portion of getting your license. If that's not the case and it's a temporary or a short-term solution for whatever your ailment happens to be, well then once you can pass the drug test, no harm, no foul.
Somebody wants to know if they're on certain medications that they're concerned about showing up, who should they contact?
Sure. So if the question is, I'm on certain medications that I'm concerned are going to show up during a drug test, who should I contact? The way I would do it, and it might not be the answer you want to hear, but the way I would do it is I would call the National Maritime Center. They have a toll-free number, and tell them that you would like to get some clarity for whatever drugs you're concerned with. Now, with that, if you're concerned about your anonymity, then I wouldn't necessarily use my name. Not that you want to be deceptive, but just tell them that this is a concern. You're just looking for the answers. And if they give you an answer, they should be able to give you a reference for you to test this. We also work with a company called MMCs. They specifically, so if you're a student of Mariners Learning System and you take one of our programs, we have a deal with them where they will evaluate your application and make sure that everything is in order for you to submit the paperwork. They have an app. You can speak to them on the telephone. This is a service that we cover the cost for the first 2 years. I think they charge $198 for that service over that period of time. But if you're a student of Mariners, it's free. So they would be a person or they would be an organization that I would feel confident going to and saying, hey, NMC or MMC, I have some concerns with some medication that I'm taking. What would you recommend? And they will give you the straight answer without concern with the ramifications of identifying yourself. Those are the questions that we have. So let's continue on. So we're just going to review why most delays happen. And again, these are avoidable. The missing of the outdated medical form, the drug test not being DOT compliant or MRO certified. We talked about the missing chain of custody or incorrect documentation, using the wrong provider or not telling them that it's for the Coast Guard. And again, especially with the drug testing, make sure that you let them know that this is a drug test for a Coast Guard captain's license. One of the tells, although you can get the forms off of our website, one of the things that I used to advise our students, and it still stands, is if I called a drug testing facility and they said, yes, we do DOT 5-panel drug tests. And if they said, yes, we have an MRO, I would feel pretty confident. But then I would just follow up and ask them whether they have the drug testing form on hand. And if this is what they do and they do it regularly, the answer should be sure. We have it right here for you. You don't have to bring one in. If they say that you have to bring one in, I might ask them just to send me an email with verification stating that they are Coast Guard approved for doing drug testing, and the results are going to be sent into a SAMHSA lab, and they are going to be reviewed by a MRO. And then the final thing that we talked about was the forms being submitted late or with incomplete information. Most common delays are preventable, just as long as you know what the right steps are. So let's talk about a step-by-step plan to make sure that you can go through this process and stay on track and avoid delays. Make sure that you schedule the physical with the licensed MD, ND, or PA. Bring the Coast Guard medical exam form to your appointment and check it before you're leaving. So again, I would read it's a 10-page document. I would read it, make sure that there's nothing that I forgot. I would make sure that I had a list of all medications that I'm taking. I would make sure that I had a list of all my doctors, any operations that I had. I would have those dates. For the most part, you're not filling out a big portion of this exam. There's like a couple lines on the second or third page that you're going to fill out that just identifies who you are. But for the most part, the examining physician or NP or PA are going to be the ones that fill out the majority of the form. But just check it before you leave. Make sure you got all the pages to the form. Make sure that you have all the information to make it easy for them to go ahead and certify you. Then you're going to schedule the 5-panel drug test with the SAMHSA certified lab. You're going to find them. They're in your area. They're basically the same labs that do the drug testing for truck drivers. So the key is the DOT 5-panel drug test. So if I were doing a Google search, that's what I would be looking up is DOT 5-panel drug test. And I would include the SAMHSA certified lab. Make sure that you do tell the clinic that is for a Coast Guard license. Make sure the MRO signs the final report and includes the chain of custody form. And then you're going to submit your forms with the application. When it comes down to submitting your application to the Coast Guard, you're no longer required to send originals. In the old days, you used to have originals with original signed copies and things like that. In today's world, you're going to take your application package with all the paperwork filled out properly and all the signatures where they all belong and everything is the way it should be. You're going to scan that in. And when you submit your application to the Coast Guard, you're going to send them a PDF file and they'll accept that. You no longer have to be sending originals, nor do they want to receive it via mail. They want to email, not through the postal service. A couple things, we talked to a lot of students and we had several that knew that we're going to be doing this. So a couple of the things that past students have wanted us to make sure that we bring up to you is bring printed instructions to for the clinic so nothing got missed. So somebody went in and they specifically said, this is what I need. These are where my concerns are. This is what I want to have done. And that way it was all printed up. They didn't have to remember. They weren't nervous because they were sitting in a doctor's office and things like that. And they were able to go through check by check. Another one talked about the drug testing facility. They were in the Midwest. And although you would think there's a lot of truck drivers out there, which there are, where this particular person was, there were not a lot of MROs. So what they had reported back to us was if they had just gone in and asked for a 5-pound DOT drug test, they would have spent money unnecessarily. but by adding that it needs for a Coast Guard license, they were able to find the right drug testing lab on their first try. Another one was I reviewed my medical form before leaving. They caught 2 missing check boxes. Happens all the time. Doctors are going through this stuff really, really quickly. They're on to the next patient. So make sure that you check this stuff. The next one had a consortium that they had joined, handled random drug testing, and gave them proof of the enrollment. That's that card that I was talking about. It's generally a fee anywhere between, and there's different levels as to how deep they'll go into this, but it's anywhere between, say, $65 and $150 a year. Some, if you sign up for multi-years, you'll get a discount on that, but it should cost no more than that. And then the final one was doing this early, gave them time to fix a small issue before submitting it. So something was wrong, but he didn't wait to the last minute, and good for them because they were able to fix whatever was missing prior to the Coast Guard looking at it. So successful students stay proactive. They bring printed instructions, ask the right questions, review the forms before leaving, and giving themselves time to correct the issues. These small steps prevent large delays, and if you follow these steps, you will be able to avoid these delays as well. We've put together a checklist specifically for you that will help you walk through the process. It highlights the DOT, SAMHSA, and MRO chain of custody requirements. You can use it to organize your steps and prevent mistakes during the application. At the end of this webinar, we'll provide you a link. You can download this thing. It's of value. It will keep you on track and make sure that you do the things that are necessary to move smoothly and smartly through the process. It puts everything in one place so that you don't have to rely on memory. You don't have to remember what I did or did not say during this. Any questions before we wrap this session up? We're just going to stop for a moment. Now you understand the full medical and drug testing process. Hopefully you have a good idea of how to avoid some of the delays and what you need to do to stay compliant throughout your licensing journey. If there's any questions or any other ways that I can help you, please let me know, and we'll address them now.
Somebody wants to know if they don't plan on using the license professionally, do they still need to be enrolled in a random drug testing program?
Sure. The question is, if I do not plan on using my license professionally, do I need to be in a random drug testing program? The answer is no. So if you're not going to use your license, you're going to have to pass the drug test, and you're going to have to pass the physical and meet all the other requirements. But once your license is issued, if you're not going to use it, you're not professionally taking people out on the boat for a fee or what the Coast Guard calls compensation, then you are not required to be in a random drug testing program. The next time you would have to pass a drug test is in 5 years when your license would be up for renewal.
Someone wants to know if you have any insight as to why they want you to be enrolled in a program if you're using it professionally.
Sure. So the question is, do I have any insight into why they would want you to be in a random drug testing program if you were to use your license professionally? Coast Guard wants to make sure that you're not doing drugs. And the only way to do that is to have some sort of a mechanism in place to test that. And just the fear or the thought or the concern that you may get randomly called in many cases is enough to prevent somebody from doing drugs. Remember, the Coast Guard's very serious about getting a captain's license. They are very concerned about the souls, the people's lives that are entrusted and in your hands. And for sure, when you're out on the water, when it's sunny and flat and everything is going well, being a captain is a really easy job. It's a pretty cool gig. But when those conditions change, somebody falls off the boat, somebody gets hurt, it's blowing really hard, there's 5 or 6 or larger seas, 1,000 other things that can go wrong really quickly. The Coast Guard wants to make sure that you have the proper training and that you are in full control of your faculties to be making intelligent decisions. That would be the primary reason why they want you to be in a random drug testing program. That's what we got. Let's see. So the final thing with this before we close is just make sure that you treat the drug testing portion as a part of becoming a professional mariner. You have to realize that the clinics that you may go to, the drug testing facilities, the locations that you get your physical within, they don't always know what's required. But hopefully you do now. Use what you've learned, follow the checklist, and you can move confidently forward. If there's any other questions, now's the time. Good. So if you need to reach out to us, you can reach us on our website. We've got our phone number. You've got an email for support. We have a 24/7 chat bot that's available from 9 in the morning till 9 at night. There's a live person or persons who are manning the live support and the phones. Or you can also submit a ticket through our help center. On this form, you're going to get this tomorrow. We'll send out this package to you. There's a QR code up in the upper right-hand corner that will be included with that package. You can scan that, and that'll give you easy access to the forms that we discussed today. Anyone who hasn't taken a course for sitting through this and listening to what we have to say, if you're not currently a student and you're interested in getting either your six-pack or your master's license course, we're going to offer until Monday.
Through this weekend.
Yeah, through this weekend. So Monday we take it down. A 25% discount on your captain's license and courses. There's a code WEB25 CAPT. That'll get you 25% off your six-pack or your master's. Again, if you're not currently a student, this is the way to save those money. And that's basically us. So I appreciate everybody being here. If there's any other questions that come up afterwards, you can always hit us with an email or give us a call during normal business hours, and we'll be happy to help you. Be well, be safe, and thanks so much for sticking around.